She walked into the bridal shop with a warm smile, just hoping to browse for a gift. But within minutes, whispers started, eyes rolled, and the staff made it clear she wasn't welcome. In front of stunned customers, they threw her out, treating her like she didn't belong there at all. Humiliated and heartbroken, she left quietly, not knowing that fate was about to flip the script. Just hours later, the same people who had shamed her were desperately trying to reach her calling, apologizing, and even begging her to return. What happened in between will shock you, and it's a reminder that sometimes the person you underestimate is the one you'll need the most. It was a quiet afternoon in the small town of Willow Creek, the kind of place where everyone knew each other's names, and gossip traveled faster than the local news. On Main Street sat a little bridal boutique called Lace and Grace, known for its gleaming window displays of white gowns and soft blush bridesmaid dresses. The shop was owned by a woman named Clarissa, who had built a reputation for catering to the upscale brides in the county. She ran the store with a team of stylists who prided themselves on providing the perfect yes to the dress moment. On this particular day, the front doorbell chimed softly, announcing the arrival of a customer. In stepped an elderly woman, perhaps in her late 70s. She wore a faded floral dress, comfortable sandals, and a cardigan that had seen better days. Her grey hair was neatly pulled back in a bun, and she carried an old leather handbag that looked like it had been with her for decades. Her name was Margaret. Margaret wasn't the typical customer that walked into Lace and Grace. The bridal shop usually attracted young women in their 20s or early 30s, often accompanied by their mothers, sisters, and friends, all buzzing with excitement. Margaret entered quietly, without any entourage, and began gently running her fingers along the delicate fabrics on display. At first, the shop assistant on duty, a young woman named Tessa, gave her a polite smile. But after a moment, she walked over and asked, "Can I help you?" in that customer service tone that's polite on the surface, but edged with impatience. Margaret smiled warmly and said, "Yes, dear, I'm looking for a wedding dress." The words seemed to hang in the air for a moment. Tessa blinked, then quickly composed herself. "Of course," she said, but her voice carried a hint of disbelief. In the corner, another stylist whispered something to her co-worker, and they both chuckled under their breath. It was clear from their expressions they didn't take Margaret seriously. Margaret wandered toward a rack of gowns, admiring the intricate lacework and beading. She seemed genuinely interested, but the staff's energy shifted. They began to hover, watching her every move as though she might damage the dresses. After a few minutes, Tessa approached again, this time with less patience. "I'm sorry, ma'am," she said. "These gowns are quite expensive. Maybe you'd like to look at something more casual. We don't really carry older styles here." It was a thinly veiled way of saying she didn't think Margaret belonged in the store. Margaret's face softened, but she didn't seem upset. "I'm looking for something special," she replied. "Money isn't the issue." But her calm assurance didn't change their assumptions. A few more awkward exchanges followed, and eventually, Clarissa, the owner, emerged from the back. Clarissa took one look at Margaret and made a snap judgment. Without asking too many questions, she suggested Margaret might be more comfortable in a department store. Then she gently but firmly guided her toward the door. Margaret left quietly, without protest, her hands clasped around the handle of her handbag. The little bell over the door jingled behind her as she stepped out onto Main Street. Inside, the staff carried on, laughing quietly about the strange visit. But just a few hours later, everything changed. Around mid-afternoon, a sleek black limousine pulled up right in front of Lace and Grace. The tinted windows reflected the sunlight, and the driver stepped out in a crisp suit, walking around to open the back door. Out stepped Margaret, still in her floral dress, still carrying her old handbag. But this time, she wasn't alone. With her was a tall, distinguished-looking man in a tailored suit and polished shoes. Behind them, two younger women in elegant attire followed, along with a photographer carrying professional gear. Clarissa, still behind the counter, froze. The chatter in the shop died instantly as everyone turned to watch. Margaret walked in, her posture straight, her expression unreadable. The man beside her introduced himself as Charles Bennett, a well-known philanthropist in the state. He shook Clarissa's hand politely, then said, "I believe there's been some misunderstanding. This is my fiancée, Margaret. We're here to select her wedding gown." You could have heard a pin drop. The shop assistants exchanged wide-eyed glances, their earlier smirks replaced by flushed cheeks. Clarissa stammered out an apology, suddenly offering water, seating, and her undivided attention. The change in tone was almost comical. Charles explained that he and Margaret had met years ago, but only recently reconnected after both had been widowed. They'd fallen in love again, and he was determined to give her the wedding of her dreams. Money was no object, he wanted her to have the best. Margaret stood quietly beside him, her eyes scanning the room, landing momentarily on Tessa, who looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. This time, every gown was available to her. The staff fussed over her, bringing out options from the most exclusive racks, offering champagne and suggesting custom fittings. The photographer began snapping pictures as Margaret tried on one beautiful gown after another. In one, she looked like royalty. In another, she seemed decades younger, the sparkle in her eyes matching the delicate crystals on the bodice. Customers who had been in the shop earlier watched the transformation in awe. Whispers filled the air, some apologetic, some admiring. Margaret wasn't boastful. She didn't gloat about the reversal of treatment. She simply enjoyed the moment, smiling as she found a gown that made her heart race. When she stepped out in the final dress, Charles beamed, tears welling in his eyes. "That's the one," he said softly. The staff nodded eagerly, praising how perfect it looked on her. Clarissa herself insisted on personally handling the alterations, free of charge. Before leaving, Charles quietly settled the bill, a staggering amount that included not only the gown, but also dresses for the bridesmaids and accessories. As they walked out, Margaret turned back to the staff and said, "It's never about what someone looks like when they walk in. You never know their story." The limousine door closed behind her, and they drove away, leaving the boutique in stunned silence. The incident became the talk of Willow Creek, and Lace and Grace learned a lesson they wouldn't soon forget. Stories like this are more than just about dresses or money. They're about human dignity, respect, and the danger of judging people by appearances. Margaret's quiet grace in the face of initial rejection spoke volumes. She could have taken offense, could have walked away for good, but she chose to return with patience and let the truth speak for itself.